Liberal Viewer presents.
So, welcome to the February 13th edition of Liberal Viewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing. Oh, also, thank you, Matthew, for the super chat contribution to start off the program. I appreciate that. Uh, my main topic. Oh, I guess I should give you my spiel I always go through that I'm using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips from the big five corporate outlets of the Sunday morning news analysis shows, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News. I got it like backwards there. The so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be really informative, educational, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all today. My main topic, UFOs over America. And that was, I don't know if it was the main topic of the Sunday morning news analysis shows, but it was definitely the top topic, as you'll see when I show the five news summaries. It was really only NBC News's Meet the Press that focused more on the State of the Union, at least in the primary news summary. They all talked about the big earthquake in Turkey, which killed tens of thousands of people, which, also a big story, although not a U.S. story. Uh, and there wasn't very much talk about this big train derailment and chemical fire in Ohio. I think that got like a brief mention on one program and not in the news summaries, just in the questioning of newsmakers. Whether those stories are bigger than this whole like UFO mania that has been going on since these unidentified flying objects have been shot down over U.S. and Canadian airspace in the wake of the Chinese balloon that made it across a lot of the United States I talked about last week. I don't know if that is, I mean, it really shows the corporate news media bias for sensationalism. It's not a partisan political bias, it's a bias you see from a lot of the news media. And I think you kind of see it in the way this topic has been covered. I mean, it's kind of a fun topic. I like talking about it, but whether it's a serious topic, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to start with my political comedy clip, which is the joke. Like, well, is it a joke or are they just trying to misdirect us? This is like there's multiple things about conspiracy theories I can talk about after we see this brief clip from Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, talking about this issue with uh, as she introduced John Kirby, the national security press secretary guy who gave a lot of details, but she had kind of this joking introduction I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
I just wanted to make sure we address this from the White House. I know there have been questions and concerns about this, but there is no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity with these recent takedowns. Again, there is no indication of aliens or terrestrial activity with these recent takedowns. Wanted to make sure that the American people knew that, all of you knew that, and it was important for us to say that from here because we've been hearing a lot about it. I'm not.
Would you tell us?
I'm just, I loved E.T. the movie, but I'm just going to leave it there.
So you heard like one of the reporters there at the end there, if you knew, would you tell us? And uh, she said that E.T. was one of her favorite movies and she would leave it there. But did you notice there a Freudian slip in there where she said, when she first said it, there was no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity. But then when she repeated it, she said aliens or terrestrial activity. Does that show a consciousness of guilt? That's something you could build a conspiracy theory on. And uh, I don't know if they knew, would they tell us? And even just look at the phrasing, no indication. Well, they have like very little information about what they shot down. They haven't really recovered the pieces that are in like remote parts of the Yukon and Alaska and the bottom of one of the Great Lakes. What was it? Lake Huron? Was that the one that the third that actually happened after the Sunday morning news analysis shows? But so I don't know. Is that like a way for the White House to present this to reporters? I'm not sure that that's the best way, but you can let me know what you think in the comment section as we watch. Well, normally I show the news summaries from longest to shortest, but I moved up Jake Tapper's news summary because it fit my topic so well, and it shows I mean, it is the most fun of the news summaries. I enjoy the news summary, and it has like some of the most mysterious facts added in that you didn't hear on any of the other news programs. But it does kind of focus on this, UFO conspiracy, like extraterrestrial alien origin UFO conspiracy stuff. But I don't know. It's also kind of fun. You can let me know what you think after we watch the Jake Tapper news summary from CNN State of the Union from yesterday together.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is knowing the truth is out there. The U.S. military is trying to figure out what exactly they shot down over the frozen coast of Alaska on Friday afternoon and what else they shot down over northern Canada on Saturday, the third time in 8 days that a U.S. F-22 fighter jet has downed a flying object in North American airspace. President Joe Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau authorized Saturday's operation, taking down an object that Canadians described as cylindrical and smaller than the suspected Chinese spy balloon shot down February 4th. Unlike that balloon, the second and third objects were both flying much lower, about 40,000 feet, close enough to be a threat to civilian aircraft. Anecdotally, a source said some pilots said the second object interfered with their sensors, and some pilots claimed not to have seen any identifiable propulsion, though U.S. officials could not confirm those details. But not much else is clear as both the U.S. and Canadian government try to recover remnants and figure it all out. What we do know is that U.S. officials are on high alert for high-flying objects after the discovery of the spy balloon. Last night, the FAA briefly shut down Montana airspace after the military detected a, quote, radar anomaly, but pilots sent to investigate did not identify any object in the skies. Joining us now, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Turner.
And I will have a clip of Mike Turner as one of, I have 4 different newsmaker clips, each with like different amounts of information. That'll, after the news summaries, they didn't have any newsmakers talking about this. They had like the most or the least expert Fox News panel. Well, I mean, they often have a lack of expertise on Fox News, but it's like way under par because I guess they mostly focused on the Super Bowl. Fox had the Super Bowl this year. And anyway, so I'll just show their panel discussion, and then 4 newsmakers. Senator Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, has like the most information. He even confirms like what was shot down was like balloon-like objects. Then Representative Mike Turner is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, followed by Representative Jim Himes, the Democrat, who's the ranking member on the on the House Intelligence Committee. And then the last person who probably has the least information is Senator John Tester, who just got some extra briefing because he was like making noises about how unhappy he was that Chinese spy balloon that was the topic last week, that it like made it over his state of Montana. But anyway, I'm going to give you the next news summary, the Fox News Sunday news summary, which did have Lucas Tomlinson sort of talking about this in the most critical way of the Biden administration, but then doing a segue into the Biden border crisis story that they play like all day, every hour on Fox News, usually with like a chyron and an introductory graphic I've shown that says like Biden border crisis. And that's why I let this play through the beginning of that story. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but just to show you that for some reason on Fox News Sunday, they're just too journalistic to put the Biden border crisis title on what is the same story. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the Fox News Sunday news summary together over here.
Good morning. You are looking live at State Farm Stadium here in Glendale, Arizona in just hours. The Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles will face off right here in Super Bowl 57. We've got plenty of inside Super Bowl scoop coming up for you this morning. But first, the U.S. shoots down a third high-altitude object in the span of a week, this time over Canada. President Joe Biden authorizing NORAD to work with the Canadian government on that operation. It comes as the president hosted governors from both parties at the White House this weekend. Much of the focus on his economic plans and the battle over federal spending just days after he got into it with lawmakers during his State of the Union address. Let's turn to Lucas Tomlinson at the White House. Hello, Lucas.
Shannon, NORAD says the two objects that blasted out of the sky over Alaska and Canada were able to successfully penetrate U.S. airspace before being detected.
It appears to be a small cylindrical object.
Canada's defense minister describing the mysterious object shot down over the Yukon Saturday afternoon. A senior U.S. official describes it as a small metallic balloon with a tethered payload. A U.S. Air Force F-22 Raptor destroyed the craft 100 miles from Alaska, where another object was shot down in a separate incident Friday.
Alaska is on the front lines of defense for the United States of America.
NORAD says the origin of the two objects destroyed over the past 2 days remains unknown. American Raptors have now shot down 3 objects over North America within a week, beginning with the Chinese spy flight off the coast of South Carolina February 4th. Hours after the shoot-down over Canada, the FAA temporarily closing the airspace over a portion of Montana not far from the Canadian border and U.S. nuclear missile silos. The restriction lifted only after NORAD launched fighter jets to investigate and declaring it had detected a, quote, radar anomaly, possibly a false alarm.
It's a Saturday night at the White House.
Investigating the mystery over Montana, and a few hours after the object had been shot down over Canada, President Biden hosted governors from across the country at the White House. Country music star Brad Paisley performed. There were a few notable absences, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who provided the GOP response to President Biden's State of the Union address days prior.
President Biden traveled to Florida following his State of the Union address. He threatened that if Republicans threaten to cut Social Security, he'll be their worst nightmare. Shannon?
Lucas Tomlinson from the White House. Lucas, thank you very much. As you know, we are live from Arizona this morning. Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs was sworn in just about a month ago. Hobbs flipped the state from red to blue in November after a hard-fought race. She faced off against Republican Kari Lake, an ally of former President Donald Trump. Lake had embraced his controversial claims about the 2020 election. So now, Arizona has a Democratic governor, as well as Democratic Senator in Mark Kelly, and a Democrat-turned-independent senator in Kyrsten Sinema. I sat down with Governor Hobbs this weekend to talk about the excitement of her state hosting the game, but also the backlash against her plans to do away with most of the state's school voucher program, and how some observers say the reality of the border crisis means she's now doing some of the very things she criticized Republicans for doing not long ago. But first, Fox News' Bill Malugin takes a look at the daunting challenges facing Americans living in border states.
Border Patrol's Tucson, Arizona sector. No.
So I pretty much pre-criticized that clip. Unfortunately, I have lost my ability to listen to the clips while I'm playing them for you, which is kind of disturbing. You can all still hear me, right? And you can hear the clips, I'm hoping. But for some reason, I tried to unplug the headphones so I could go get something while the clip was playing and still hear the clip. And now, despite playing with all my stupid sound settings, I just cannot get anything to whatever, which really makes it harder for me to comment on the clips. So even though I watched them before, I have to remember what I was going to say. I'll work on it when I show you the next news summary. I think I pretty much pre-criticized that clip anyway. The next one is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where George Stephanopoulos and their reporter Rachel Scott give a report on the unidentified flying object shot down over U.S. and Canadian airspace, and also a little bit on Biden's State of the Union address that I will talk about with you a little more after. Well, I hope we're going to watch the clip together over here. If I can, can I? Oh, now you can't hear me. What about now? Can you hear me? No, you can. Why is this? That's why I don't know what is going on. No, go away. I'm trying to get this thing to. I'm trying now. Whatever. Okay. apologize that I can't seem to watch the clips with you. I'll try to figure out what is going on while we watch the next news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Overnight, President Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau confirmed that an F-22 fighter jet shot down a flying object, this time over Canadian airspace. It was the third incident this week following the downing of a craft over Alaska and the Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina last Saturday. President Biden is dealing with the fallout as he challenged Republicans in Congress and set down some markers for his own re-election campaign with a feisty State of the Union to a raucous House chamber. Senior congressional correspondent Rachel Scott starts us off.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
President Biden facing a divided Congress for the first time.
The State of the Union is strong.
Extending his hand to the new GOP Speaker of the House.
I don't want to ruin your reputation, but I look forward to working with you.
But sharply challenging Republicans on the debt ceiling and spending talks, singling out one senator's plan to sunset key programs.
Some of my Republican friends want to take the economy hostage. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal.
Republicans firing back. Biden using the exchange to turn the tables on the GOP.
So, folks, as we all apparently agree, Social Security and Medicare is off the books now, right? They're not to be sponsored. We got unanimity.
After the speech, Republicans disavowing the proposal targeted by the president.
It's clearly the Rick Scott plan. It is not the Republican plan. It's just a bad idea.
I've said it many times before. Social Security and Medicare are off the table.
The president hitting the road, keeping the pressure on in key swing states.
These benefits belong to you, and I will not allow anyone to cut them, not today, not tomorrow, not ever.
Biden says he still hasn't decided on 2024.
What's stopping you from making that decision?
I'm just not ready to make it.
But sounding more and more like a candidate.
Let's finish the job.
Gearing up for the fights ahead. For This Week, Rachel Scott, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
And we are joined now by the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Yeah. Oh, and I got it fixed. I was partway through the clip. I found the setting on my streaming software where I was able to watch that. And it was actually the ABC. I said NBC News Meet the Press had the best, most serious news summary earlier on, but I had it mixed up. It was actually ABC. And you'll see there that, and they also get the most information out of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer that I'll show when we get to clip 8. If you're, by the way, down in the video description, I give short summaries of all 11 clips, and so you can see clip number 8 coming up will be Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader. ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos there with their reporter Rachel Scott, maybe focused on a more important story than the unidentified flying objects, even though the unidentified flying objects are more sensational, but the whole Medicare, Social Security thing, I mean, I almost thought about doing that as my main topic because it is probably a more important, impactful topic, the Biden State of the Union and the back and forth with Republicans on saving Medicare and Social Security. And there were a bunch of clips I could have taken on that as well, but all you're going to get is what was in that news summary. And then the next, actually, NBC News Meet the Press, their news summary was almost the exact same length as ABC's, but focused much more on UFOs in U.S. and Canadian airspace shot down, and I will talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together.
Good Sunday morning. For the second day in a row and the third time in a week, the U.S. military has shot down suspicious high-altitude objects over North America. U.S. fighter jets downed unidentified objects over Alaska on Friday and Canada on Saturday. This quick reaction comes after criticism that President Biden's response to the Chinese spy balloon last week was delayed, while it drifted over the United States for days until being shot down after it left the Carolina coast. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau ordered the takedown of a cylindrical object over the Yukon on Saturday afternoon. He spoke with President Biden, who also ordered the object to be shot down. The FAA temporarily closed airspace in central Montana when NORAD detected a radar anomaly and sent fighter aircraft to investigate. They did not find anything that correlated with those radar hits. Just a day earlier, Biden ordered another unidentified object, roughly the size of a small car, so we've been told, shot down over frozen water in Alaskan airspace. But at a White House briefing, officials did not disclose the incident until reporters brought it up.
Can you speak to rumors that there is another Chinese balloon above Alaska or any other parts of U.S. territory that the U.S. shot down?
So I can confirm that the Department of Defense was tracking a high-altitude object over Alaska airspace in the last 24 hours. The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. Out of an abundance of caution and at the recommendation of the Pentagon, President Biden ordered the military to down the object.
Again, for some reason, the spokesperson, John Kirby, did not volunteer this information about fighter jets being scrambled to shoot down another object until a reporter in that room asked. In a statement on Saturday, the U.S. military could not provide details about the object, including its capabilities, purpose, or origin. And again, there are some weather issues when it comes to actually collecting this thing that was shot down. The shoot down occurred as the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard continue to recover remnants of the Chinese spy balloon from the Atlantic Ocean last week. We asked the White House and the Pentagon to provide any guest this morning to tell us more about these incidents. Both declined. Congressman Jim Hines of Connecticut is the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee.
So yeah, that was the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, and I will have a clip of Representative Jim Hines. It also focused heavily on the UFO controversy, though not in the alien extraterrestrial way you saw some from CNN State of the Union. The final news summary is just sort of a brief teaser from CBS News' Face the Nation and Margaret Brennan, which I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. As we come on the air, the big question in our minds today is what is going on here with what seem like a deluge of potential incursions? What are these objects? Where are they coming from? What is their purpose? And are we experiencing an increase of the so-called unidentified aerial objects, or are we just looking for them more carefully following the Chinese spy balloon event? We will do our best to try and get some of those questions answered today. We are going to begin with Montana's Senator Jon Tester.
Doesn't really get those answers. Most of those answers from Senator Jim Tester. That'll be the final clip I show. Probably the least informative of all of the ones I'm going to show you, other than maybe this next one, because Fox News Sunday, they spent a lot of their program focusing on the Super Bowl and football. You'll see, well, you already saw Shannon Bream was reporting from there, and the expert panel they had to talk about this whole issue, mostly about China and the Chinese spy balloon. They didn't really talk about extraterrestrials and aliens, but the two panelists that Shannon Bream had on were Bill Hemmer, the co-host of America's Newsroom, just because he's a big football fan and happened to be going to the Super Bowl. And then this other guy who I guess is a sports reporter, Clay Travis, and then has gotten these increasingly extreme political views over time, I guess. But it's really more speculation, but just anti-Biden speculation. It's China, it's Russia, it shows weakness. And you'll see they say it's a humiliation to Biden, which is kind of contradicted by one of the Democrats later saying it was a humiliation to China. But anyway, I'll talk about that really amateur, low expertise Fox News Sunday panel discussion on the topic that sort of stands in for their newsmaker clips, because there weren't any on the topic from Fox News Sunday. And anyway, we'll talk about it a little more after we watch together over here.
It's coming up in just a minute, but first, time for some more news and politics of the morning. Less than a week after the U.S. brought down that Chinese spy balloon over the Atlantic Ocean, we are learning at least 2 more high-altitude objects have been detected and taken down, raising a slew of new questions about what's going on. Well, here to help us answer, joining me now, America's newsroom anchor Bill Hemmer and Outkick.com founder Clay Travels. Gentlemen, they let you into the stadium.
Yes, they did.
We're glad that you made it inside.
The best I mean, Shannon, honestly.
This setup is not too shabby.
Who builds a better one?
I mean,
Agreed.
yeah, so we share it together. We
Yes.
luxuriate in it together. Okay, let's talk about the balloons, because then last night we also had this scare over Montana. Seems like they investigated and maybe it was a false reading on the radar, or at least they didn't find anything there. Clay, what's going on?
Great question. And Bill and I were just talking about this. How in the world do we not know exactly what they've shot down and what it's exactly going on there? To me, I wonder whether there's some sort of divide inside of China, if China is involved here, and whether they're actually having maybe a military versus Xi Jinping dispute in some way. Because it was so humiliating, I think, what they did to Biden to have that balloon go across the nation for as long as it did, that he felt like he had to have an aggressive response. But it's weird to me, guys, that we still don't have definitive answers as to what's going on.
Yeah, we deserve answers, actually.
Yes.
And whether or not all three of these objects were China, or perhaps they weren't. What if the other two were from Moscow? What we need to know. The last 10 days to me have given me a whole Cold War sense. It's taken me back to the 1980s. And I'm not saying we're at that level, but the economies of the Soviet Union and the United States were never intertwined back then. But today we are with China in a significant way. I think about two things this past week. Joe Biden's interview on PBS, when he was asked about this ordeal, he said to Judy Woodruff that it would not matter in the end. His position was he doesn't think U.S.-China relations have taken a big hit. Well, I don't know if they have or not.
But when our
the other
defense
thing I would say,
secretary calls and they don't take the call, that seems like
but if you want to find something that Congress can agree on today, the House passed a resolution condemning Beijing 419-0.
Yeah.
We rarely, if ever, see that.
The other thing I would say is when you think about the response and how exactly it's going on, imagine what Americans would contemplate if during the 1980s, Russia had sent any sort of spy initiative across the entire country. It would have been seen as a major affront to our national sovereignty. The fact that Biden is trying to downplay this, to me, doesn't correspond with the national mood in any way.
Well,
I think he looks tone deaf.
And interestingly, this opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal, after we shot down the thing in Alaska, whatever that was, on Friday, says this. This time, Biden wastes no time shooting down a flying foreign intruder. The White House seems to have underestimated the bipartisan political anger at allowing a Chinese spy craft to wander over U.S. military sites for days before it was shot down. So, Bill, they've seen and heard the backlash now. So no hesitation with this thing in Alaska.
You know what I thought when we were with you in Washington this past week for the State of the Union? The administration was giving off the vibe that, hey, we took care of it. And I thought it was a little tone deaf. Everywhere I went the previous weekend, for 4 straight days, all anyone was talking about was this balloon, where it came from and what we need to know about it.
Well, here's something that Senator Tester, a Democrat, had to say.
Oh, and of course, Fox News loves finding Democrats saying critical things of the Biden administration. And I pretty much pre-criticized that clip you heard, like Bill Hemmer speculate based on nothing. Oh, maybe that was China and this is Russia. And that Clay Travis talked also about China humiliating Biden, which that doesn't really seem to fit the facts. And I'd, trust his opinion a little bit better if he knew how to pronounce the word sovereignty. That might give me a little more faith in his expertise on these types of national security issues. But anyway, you also saw there, like I said at the end, that John Tester, they were about to reference John Tester. They referenced the Wall Street Journal without mentioning the Wall Street Journal is also owned by the same company as Fox News, and they're all feeding off their own anti-Biden Republican propaganda bubble or whatever. And but I will show John Tester sort of walking back his anti-Biden comments a little bit in the final clip from CBS News' Face the Nation. But before I get to that, I want to show you the 3 more informative clips. The first one, the person who seems to have been briefed the most here is Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who was over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. He knew so much that he's even willing to say that these were like balloon-like objects that were shot down, which is more than like anyone else has been willing to say. And I will talk about that newsmaker clip after we watch George Stephanopoulos and Chuck Schumer discuss the UFOs over America over here.
I want to start with this question over the Chinese spy planes and other aerial objects. 3 incidents in a week. President Biden took some heat from your Democratic colleagues for not shooting down the spy balloon sooner. What can you tell us about these last 2 incidents, Friday and Saturday night? And are you confident in the overall administration response?
Yes. I was briefed by Jake Sullivan last night, so let me get right to it. And I'll give a little background and then get to your specific. The bottom line is, first, until a few months ago, we didn't know of these balloons. Our intelligence and our military did not know. This went as far back as President Trump, at least 3 times.
It's wild that we didn't know, isn't it?
It is wild that we didn't know, absolutely, and I'll get to that in a minute. Now they are learning a lot more, and the military and the intelligence are focused like a laser on first gathering and accumulating the information, then coming up with a comprehensive analysis of what went on before, what's going on now, and what could go on in the future. You can be sure that if any American interests or people are at risk, they'll take appropriate action. Until they get that comprehensive analysis, however, we have to look at each balloon individually.
Were these
and see
balloons
what
Friday
they're
and
stunned.
Saturday night?
They believe they were, yes, but much smaller than the first one. Both of those, one over Canada, one over Alaska, were at 40,000 feet. Immediately, it was determined that that's a danger to commercial aircraft, which also fly at 40,000 feet. And so the second one, in cooperation with the Canadians, the first one with the Americans, took it down. And that's appropriate. The first balloon, there was a much different rationale, which I think was the appropriate rationale. We got enormous intelligence information from surveilling the balloon as it went over the United States.
Didn't the Chinese get enormous intelligence as well?
Well, they could have been getting it anyway, but we have to know what they're doing, okay? And we don't know exactly, but we got a lot of that. And even more importantly, by shooting it down over water, U.S. waters, only 6 miles out from South Carolina, we're going to probably be able to piece together this whole surveillance balloon and know exactly what's going on. So that's a huge coup for the United States.
This program is going to have to be shut down now, hasn't it? The Chinese aren't going to be able to send balloons.
Look, I think the Chinese were humiliated. I think the Chinese were caught lying, and I think it's a real step back for them. Yes, I think they're going to have to. I think they're probably going to have to get rid of it or do something because they look really bad. And they're not just doing the United States. This is a crew of balloons. We saw one in South America. They've probably been all over the world.
So what do we do now to counter China overall? If they're clearly taking more provocative actions.
Yeah, and one more point I'd make on this, by the way. I do think Senator Tester is looking into why it took so long for us, our military, our intelligence, to know about these balloons. That's something I support. Congress should look at that. That's the question we have to answer. I think our military, our intelligence are doing a great job, present and future. I feel a lot of confidence in what they're doing. But why, as far back as the Trump administration, did no one know about this? Now, on China in general, look, China, I have always been a China hawk, but China is the second biggest power in the world, economically, geopolitically. We can't just have a Cold War with them. We have to have a relationship with them. But China's taken advantage of us over and over and over again. And this administration has been just about tougher than any other. The bill I passed, the Chips and Science bill, is going to bring all that semiconductor manufacturing back to America. Just the other day, I was in East Fishkill, the old IBM plant. A new company, American on Semi, is taking plants out of Korea, out of Japan, and putting them here to make semiconductors. The administration did another thing on its own. It said we're not going to send any of the materials used to make semiconductors, that is the machinery, to China. That's a real blow. The Chinese are feeling that badly. We did a similar thing on a smaller basis just with these balloons. 6 Chinese companies that probably make the balloons are sanctioned. So I think this administration is strong and tough on China, but mindful of the fact that we just, we can't stop talking to them. We have to try to have some kind of relationship.
This won't make my daughters happy, but how about banning TikTok?
And you can see the rest of that. You can see Chuck Schumer's answer on whether he should make George Stephanopoulos' daughters unhappy by banning TikTok by clicking and the link in the video description to under sources for the full ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos program. But I think you got a lot of information from Chuck Schumer there about these balloon-like objects. Also, his opinion that it's China that looks bad, not Biden, who's been humiliated, as they were claiming on Fox News. You can tell me who's right on that one. And then Chuck Schumer, of course, as Senate Majority Leader, is supporting the other Democratic Senator, John Tester, who started off critical of Biden, but now is more critical of the military and intelligence for not knowing about these balloons sooner. And you'll see that come up when I get to the final newsmaker clip, John Tester talking to Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation. But I want to show you at least one Republican expert who still has a lot of the Fox News type talking points and bias. This is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Representative Mike Turner, talking to Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper asks a lot of questions about the UFOs, including that whole thing about the pilots who claimed that their sensors were being messed with and that there were no means of propulsion. He kind of brings up the whole alien extraterrestrial angle, but that's not where Mike Turner's going. He wants to, blame Biden, and he seems to be criticizing him for shooting down the China spy balloon too slow, but maybe shooting these down too fast. Or I guess he's happy that Biden is trigger happy. That doesn't really sound too good to me. And at one point, I think he even tries to make this be another indication that Biden is soft on securing the border, because that's like a huge Fox News talking point. And anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch the interview of Mike Turner from Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union yesterday together over here.
Yes. What can you tell us? What were these second and third objects that the military shot down, and where'd they come from?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't know, as the administration is saying they don't know. They do appear somewhat trigger happy, although this is certainly preferable to the permissive environment that they showed when the Chinese spy balloon was coming over some of our most sensitive sites. I think one thing that this shows is certainly the fallacy of the argument of the Biden administration saying that the height of the Chinese balloon caused them to have no concern. Because certainly, as we know, whatever goes up can come down. And just saying that this Chinese spy balloon was high and these are lower and therefore they actually pose a hazard really isn't a differentiation I think that anybody's comfortable with.
Are you glad that they shot down these two objects? Because obviously you and other Republicans were critical for that the Biden team took as long as they did to shoot down the object that was clearly a Chinese spy balloon.
Sure. As I was saying, I would prefer them to be trigger happy than to be permissive. But we're going to have to see whether or not this is just the administration trying to change headlines. But what I think this shows, which is probably more important to our policy discussion here, is that we really have to declare that we're going to defend our airspace, and then we need to invest. What's become clear in the public discussion is that we don't really have adequate radar systems. We certainly don't have an integrated missile defense system. We're going to have to begin to look at the United States airspace as one that we need to defend and that we need to have appropriate sensors to do so. This shows some of the problems and gaps that we have. We need to fill those as soon as possible because we certainly now ascertain there is a threat.
Do you think that the second and third objects shot down Friday and Saturday were spying on America and Canada? Is it possible they were just weather balloons or something else that's benign?
Yeah, it's interesting when the Department of Defense gave its first statement on this. If you notice, there was a word slipped in there that you certainly didn't hear when the Chinese spy balloon was over the United States, and that's the word corporate of origin. So even the Department of Defense is saying a very broad net as to what these things might be. But it shows a renewed interest and renewed dedication to defending United States airspace. Certainly the United States, this administration now needs to declare that it will defend its airspace, which of course is going to be difficult for an administration that has difficulty controlling the ground sovereignty to declare air sovereignty, but we need to do so.
When do you expect to get briefed again as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee?
This is particularly annoying about this administration. The Biden administration needs to stop briefing Congress through our television sets and actually come and sit down and brief us. What we're seeing here is a number of announcements by the administration without any real information being given to Congress. This could be because they don't have any information. From the press conference we saw, it does seem like they took this action without a real understanding for what they were going after, but having declared it a hazard. But we'll see as the information comes to Congress. But I do think that there needs to be more engagement between the administration and Congress. Probably they're a little hesitant after the Chinese balloon fiasco, where they let it go across the country to great criticism, bipartisan and bicameral criticism from Congress.
Have objects like these always been moving in and out of U.S. airspace, and we're just now learning about them with with new technology and shooting them down? Or do you think this is a new recent development?
I think it's certainly a new recent development that you have China being so aggressive in entering other countries' airspace and doing so for clear intentions to spy with very sophisticated equipment. I mean, the very scale of this balloon and of the technology that was deployed by China in spying on the United States is unprecedented. No other nation has anything like it, and no other nation's attempted it. But certainly there are things at times that come and go from our airspace that we track, that we try to determine if it's going to be a threat, that don't rise to the level of the very large, sophisticated Chinese spy balloon.
A source briefed on the intelligence said that some of the pilots said the object interfered with their sensors on the plane. I think this is the second object shot down over Alaska on Friday. Interfered with their sensors. Not all the pilots reported that, but some did. Some pilots also claimed to have seen no identifiable propulsion on the object and could not explain how it was even staying in the air. What do you make of those reports?
Well, at this point, they are just reports, so we'll have to wait until we get the final information. But because this thing was shot down, we have an ability to do the forensics, to do the exploitation of it when it's found. And that will answer a lot of our questions. And also getting the data from the various planes, their sensors, what they actually were seeing or not seeing, in addition to what the pilots saw, will be really important. But there's going to be a number of questions to answer here. The big point is that this is time for the United States to take this as a turning point to invest. We need more sophisticated radar systems. We have them. We just don't have them deployed to protect continental United States. An integrated missile defense system. We've helped invest in Israel having an integrated missile defense system. We don't have one ourselves. This is a turning point where we need to discuss this is a threat and how do we respond to it.
Let's turn to talk about the latest in the classified documents investigation.
And yeah, so there was the cross-examination sort of Representative Mike Turner from Jake Tapper. He did ask the alien extraterrestrial questions about, no visible means of propulsion and messing with the sensors, although those were kind of like rumors. That's why, CNN State of the Union kind of went out there on the focusing on the alien extraterrestrial aspect and with, very little evidence to back it up. So, like I said, it makes the story more fun, but does it make it more journalistic? You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. And I think I pretty much pre-criticized everything Mike Turner said that were Republican talking points there. You saw he was very critical of Biden, for the permissive attitude with the Chinese spy balloon. But then I'd rather they be trigger happy. That trigger happy isn't like what you want to hear from the person in charge of the Intelligence Committee in the House for the nation with like the largest military by far, like with 20 times the military spending of the, or like the military spending of the next 20 countries combined or whatever we're at here in the United States, that, we should be really nervous and trigger happy. That's how we also have a lot of nuclear weapons, but I guess if it comes to like shooting down things, that also could have really bad consequences. So, that was one of the most disturbing things about that clip, which I mentioned before I showed it, but I just wanted to point out again. And then the next clip is the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, the same committee that Mike Turner chairs. This is the highest ranking Democrat on that committee, who also hasn't been briefed. And that was one of the like kind of bipartisan things. You didn't hear it so much from Chuck Schumer because it sounded like he'd been briefed, but all the rest of the members of Congress here, they kind of believe in the checks and balances in the U.S. Constitution. That's one of the great things about the U.S. Constitution is if there's not huge extreme partisanship, sometimes there's like a tension between the Congress and the executive, whoever controls, but especially when there's a different political party controlling one of the houses. And that's not a bad thing to have some tension and have the legislative branch critical that they're not getting enough information. And you heard that from Mike Turner, and I think you'll hear Jim Himes make an even broader statement about that, like kind of blaming the whole UFO extraterrestrial thing on the lack of information that is coming out, saying that, the lack of information creates a vacuum where people like fill it in with their conspiracies. That's not something Chuck Todd really listens to, because you'll see at the end of this clip, I'm kind of giving away the ending. He gets really speculative about, oh, what if it's China? What if these latest balloons are China, or latest objects are China? Like, not even hearing what Jim Himes is saying about that. And then Jim Himes gives this explanation that's really important for why there have been these, it's 2 for the Sunday shows, but since the Chinese spy balloon, there actually been 3 objects shot down over U.S. and Canadian airspace. And does that mean that there are all these new objects, or that we're just looking more carefully? And if you listen to Jim Himes carefully here, he gives the explanation that the Department of Defense gave last night after the Sunday shows, that, yeah, they've like turned up the gain on the radar. They've increased the aperture or whatever. They're like, he explains in this clip how like NORAD has mostly been looking for like airplanes and missiles that are carrying nuclear weapons and about to blow us up or whatever. But now after this Chinese spy balloon, they're like they're like changing the settings on the radar so that they look at things that are smaller and slower. And that's why there have been all these incidents in the last week. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after you watch that penultimate newsmaker clip together over here.
So let me ask, what can you tell us, and have you been briefed yet?
Well, Chuck, the first balloon, the one that was shot down off the coast of South Carolina, we got a very extensive briefing on at the Gang of 8 level, and then subsequently the entire Congress got a top-secret briefing on it. So we're pretty good on that one. You lose track of these things. Since then, of course, there's been the shoot-down over Alaska and the shoot-down over the Yukon. Congress has been out of session, and so we have not been directly briefed on that. Our staffs have been kept informed. But the reality is, Chuck, here, I think part of the reason, and by the way, I have real concerns about why the administration is not being more forthcoming with everything that it knows. But part of the problem here is that both of the second and the third objects were shot down in very remote areas. So my guess is that there's just not a lot of information out there yet to share.
You said on Friday, you speculated, and you admitted you were speculating, that, hey, there's a lot of stuff up in the air these days. Private companies put up issues, things up there to deal with Wi-Fi. There's other foreign objects from other countries up there, including weather balloons. Just how cluttered is it up there?
Well, yeah, and that's still where my head is. And I should be clear, as I was on Friday, that, I haven't been briefed on the other 2 shoot-downs. But I look back a year ago to when we had this both open hearing and classified hearing on what are most people called UFOs. You're supposed to call unidentified aerial phenomenon. And what we learned in that hearing is that there is a lot of garbage up there. It's really not that hard. Certainly countries can do it, companies can do it and do to it. Individuals with resources can put balloons up there. And so there is a lot of garbage up there. And my, again, speculative guess as why we're seeing these things happen in quick succession is that now we're really attuned to looking for them, right? Without getting into detail, I can tell you that much of our radar, much of our sensors are really designed against the threats that most Americans are familiar with. We spent generations worried about missiles coming over the North Pole. They move very, very quickly and don't act like balloons. We always worry about aircraft. Those of us who remember 9/11 worry about aircraft that are unidentified. The truth is that that most of our sensors and most of what we were looking for didn't look like balloons. Now, of course, we're looking for them, so I think we're probably finding more stuff.
So, and do you think, are we changing our posture? It does seem as if we'd see this unusual aerial phenomenon, And the decision, if there was not a threat to the country or a threat to an individual or an airline, we let it fly up there. Do you sense we're changing our posture, that if we don't know the origin, we're shooting it down now?
Well, I certainly hope not. I mean, if that's where we're going to go, there will be an accident. You know, at some point we're going to shoot down something we don't want to shoot down, whether it's civil aviation or what have you. But no, I think it's a little early to make that call. I mean, I would say two things about it. Number one, there's a logic to what the administration has done. The two shoot downs have occurred around objects that were a threat to civil aviation. Remember, the initial Chinese balloon was at 50, 60,000 feet. That's not a threat. If you're down at or below 40,000 feet, now you're in the travel zones for civilian aviation. There are concerns about gathering intelligence. That's why I think it wasn't wrong for the administration to want to observe the first Chinese balloon. There's questions about where this stuff might land. The two shoot downs obviously were over very remote areas. You know, the one thing, Chuck, that is troubling me here, I sort of see a pattern. As I looked at social media this morning, you know, all of a sudden, massive speculation about alien invasions and, you know, additional Chinese action or Russian action. In the absence of information, people's anxiety leads them into potentially destructive areas. So I do hope that very soon the administration has a lot more information for all of us on what's going on.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to figure out here. The administration seems to want to downplay all of these incidents. I mean, look, again, the fact that a reporter had to drag this out of the administration, they don't want to be forthcoming. Is that because they don't know what it is, or they don't want to tell us what it is?
Yeah, I really can't answer that question because I haven't been briefed either. And I do think, by the way, look, I got a very detailed briefing on the first Chinese balloon, and I think the decision-making process there was very good. We now own something that we're going to exploit for intelligence. I think the decision-making was good, but I would observe for you as well that that we didn't hear about the first balloon until it was over Montana. And again, I think there may be reasons for it, but and maybe it's because I'm in politics and so spend a lot of time talking to folks in grocery stores and town hall meetings. You know, in an absence of information, people will fill that gap with anxiety and other stuff. So I wish the administration was a little quicker to tell us everything that they do know.
Worst case scenario, this is China doing, you know, basically not taking any lesson from our decision to shoot down the first one. If we find out these two objects are also of Chinese government origin, what does that say about our relationship right now?
And that ending there, I promised you, where Chuck Todd doesn't hear what Jim Himes said about, you know, don't fill the absence of information space with conspiracies and speculation. And Chuck Todd answers with, yeah, but what if this is worst case scenario? Worst case scenario, it's China, and how should we respond to them still doing that? And anyway, Jim Himes sort of speculates that it's not China, but says he's speculating and is waiting to hear more. But I thought that was kind of funny that Chuck Todd did exactly what Jim Himes multiple times in that answer said was the problem with lack of information, where that's the one place he agrees with the chair of the Intelligence Committee, Mike Turner, that they're not getting briefed quickly enough or well enough by the Biden administration. That's the tension between the legislative and executive branch. But I was also, the one thing, I pretty much pre-criticized the clip or made my commentary before I showed the clip and pointed out the important things he said about that, about turning up the sensitivity of the radar. But the one thing he also said there that's really important is he was kind of the antidote to the, I'd rather they be trigger happy, from Representative Mike Turner, the chair of his committee. Maybe is that the difference between Republicans and Democrats? Republicans, you know, are rather be trigger happy, and then the Democrat Jim Himes is like, well, you know, if we change our posture so that we're shooting down everything, that's going to lead to mistakes, and eventually we're going to shoot down something we don't want to shoot down. And it's not like civilian airliners haven't been shot down by mistake by, the United States shot down, I think it was an Iranian airliner over the Mediterranean at one point, and that's not the only civilian Korean. There was that Korean airliner shot down by the Russians, and I mean, that's one of the things that happens if you're trigger happy, right? So good to have a Democrat saying there are some downsides to being trigger happy. And then finally, I want to show you the last clip. Senator John Tester, he, I think, has been like least briefed of all the people. Chuck Schumer is part of the gang of 8, which is the Senate majority and minority leaders, the House, the Speaker of the House and the House Minority Leader, and then the heads of the Senate, the chair and ranking members of the Senate and House Intelligence Committees. So Jim Himes and Mike Turner are part of the gang of 8, and they get special briefings. Senator John Tester, I think, just got a special briefing because he was critical of the Biden administration in a hearing, and I saw that all over Fox News. Still today, I saw that from Fox News, even though they didn't show him walking it back in this next clip about how he understands now more the decision-making on the Chinese spy balloon. But anyway, that's the final clip I want to show you is Montana Senator John Tester talking both about the UFOs and the Chinese spy balloon from last week, and then walking back his criticism of the Biden administration, just wanting more information from the military. And I'll talk about that with you a little more after we watch that final newsmaker clip together over here.
So late Saturday, NORAD and NORTHCOM said there was a radar anomaly over your state, which is why airspace was closed. Was it a false alarm, or is there an object over Montana?
Well, I think the investigation is still going on as we speak. The truth is that there was an anomaly, and they've investigated. I think it got dark last night, so they couldn't fully check it out. I'm sure as we speak, it's being checked out right now.
So it hasn't been ruled out. There may still be something up there.
Absolutely. There may still be something up there. It may be a false alarm.
Is the policy now to shoot down any unidentified object?
Well, I think that's a very, very good question, and that's a better question for General Milley. But the truth of the matter is that they need to have a policy. They, being the military, needs to have a policy to recommend to the president. It's something that, as chairman of the Defense Committee and ranking member Collins, we've already talked about this. We're going to make sure that there is a plan. We're going to make sure if that plan needs to be funded, that it gets funded. This is what's gone on the last 2 weeks or so, 10 days, has been nothing short of craziness. And the military needs to have a plan to not only determine what's out there, but determine the dangers that go with it.
So you don't know what will happen to this object over Montana?
My guess is it'll get shot down, but the military will make an assessment as to potential collateral damage, just like they did on the Chinese spy balloon.
So you have spent time, as I understand it, with General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and other DoD officials. Could he share with you anything about this mysterious object that was cylindrical and floating over Canada, or the car-sized one over Alaska?
Well, I think you've got what he shared with me at that moment in time, and that they had done an assessment of it and determined that it was unmanned, and determined that it should be shot down because they weren't absolutely positive that it was of no threat.
So the object over Alaska was near Prudhoe Bay, which is one of the most important energy fields in this country.
Yes.
Does that sound to you like it's espionage, state-driven espionage?
Well, look, I don't think things happen by mistake when it comes to China.
You think this was China? I
don't know. I don't know that it's China. We will find out later on if, in fact, it was affiliated with the Chinese Communist government or not. But the bottom line is that I think we need to take these things seriously. I think the president, and I think more importantly the military, are taking them very, very seriously. And to back that up, I think through the appropriations process and the Defense Committee, we're going to make sure that they're taking it seriously. So the checks and balances will be there as we move forward. But this is, like I said, this has been a phenomenon that we haven't had recently, where we've had other countries that have went into our airspace for the purpose of trying to gather information on what we're doing here in the United States.
You said, and you underscored your key role in helping to determine the budget there for the Pentagon, that you don't remember hearing anything that dealt with balloons. How long has the military actually been tracking this?
Well, I mean, that's a better question for the military from my perspective.
But they weren't sharing it with Congress.
They weren't sharing it with me. And so I can't say what their awareness was over the last 10 years. But obviously there was some awareness, but whether it was up to where it needed to be, that's a debate that Congress needs to have and questions that need to be answered by our military leadership.
You were very critical. You made that very clear, plain spoken, about the fact that administration didn't shoot down the confirmed Chinese spy balloon over the state of Montana. And you wanted it shot down as soon as it was in U.S. airspace. Has your view changed at all after you've been briefed?
Yeah, well, so initially I was very much for shooting it down when it was over the Aleutians. I think what transpired is that the military took assessments as to potential collateral damage and the threat of this balloon. And, we pay these folks good money to make sure we keep our nation safe. And I respect their view, and the president followed that. Going on in the future, I think there needs to be a plan that's right up front, so we know exactly what's going to happen when these balloons come in and their threat is assessed. What's going to happen? But look, I got briefed both an open session and a classified session, and quite honestly, the military and intelligence community's explanation of what transpired with that balloon, I accept. Is it something that I would have done right out of the chute? No, I would have probably done it different. But that's not saying that I'm right or I'm wrong or they're right or they're wrong.
Right.
In the end, we ended up with a balloon that they've recovered, and they're going to take and put it back together and reverse engineer it, and we'll find out what they're up to, plus the information that was gathered while it came across the United States.
So
yeah, like I said, John Tester kind of walked back his criticism of the Biden administration, focusing it more on military and intelligence and, what they know about balloons and why it wasn't in the budget. And like I said before I showed that clip, the John Tester criticism of the Biden administration in a congressional hearing last week got played over and over and over again on Fox News, even today after that Face the Nation interview, and like total crickets on him walking it back on Face the Nation on Fox News, of course, because they're not really a journalistic organization. They're a propaganda outlet of the Republican Party, as I've said many times before. Oh, and one thing I found kind of amusing, and well, there's one thing about that I think I heard that there was something they thought they saw over Montana on Saturday night, and then you heard John Tester say on the Sunday morning shows that they're going to keep checking that out. Something that was kind of amusing about that was like with all this like sophisticated technology and everything, the thing they couldn't keep tracking it because it got dark. I saw one of my commenters in the live comments, Z Alpha, got dark last night, then light again next day, which I believe was a reference to what John Tester said. That was kind of amusing. I thought that's why they couldn't keep tracking it. And then when was that the thing that got shot down over Michigan on Sunday night after the Sunday shows? Like the thing they thought they saw over Montana, then they later shot down over Lake Huron over in the state of Michigan, or actually I believe it may have ended up crashing into Canada, but on the Canadian side of the border. But anyway, that was an unanswered question, but that is the last of my Newsmaker clips. I hope you appreciated all the time and effort I put into making this show. It was even a little extra effort this week. I think it was like maybe 10 or 11 hours of effort to create the show and broadcast it. So if you like what I'm doing, I did get the Super Chat contribution from Matthew at the beginning of the show that I appreciate. Down under the video, there are links to both Patreon to become a monthly patron. That is one of my most dependable supports, where I get like the most amount of your contribution, because if you do it through YouTube, like the Super Chat thing, which I do appreciate, but YouTube takes a much bigger chunk out of that than Patreon does, especially since I've been on Patreon so long. And but if you want to give through YouTube, there's a join button under the video, or you can also give with a much lower chunk taken out directly through PayPal. And at the if you give $5 on Patreon or PayPal and you give me a shipping address, I will send you both this hashtag liberal viewer sticker made of weatherproof vinyl and this ACLU Constitution with a like what to do if the police stop you guide in the back. And if you read this, you'll understand the tension between the legislative and executive branches I was talking about earlier. So I guess I would point that out. I hope you like the edited versions of my live stream I put out the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure if I'll have time to do it this week, and definitely not next week, because actually next week I will be doing my live stream not from home. I will be doing it from the far north parts of California. I'm going to be visiting my daughter over President's Day weekend in college up in one of the most northern parts of California, but I'm going to bring everything along, and I hopefully will be able to do the live stream from basically it's kind of like an Airbnb where I'm staying. It's actually a place I stayed before a few years ago, and I did the show during sunset, and it turned out okay, but we'll see how it works out this time. But until next Monday, or until I have time to upload some other kind of video, I appreciate all of you who joined me for the live stream. I appreciate my recorded show viewers and their comments. And anyway, until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.